Let's get back to Hurricane Helene.
Yes, North Carolina was hit with flooding it hasn't seen in a century, some calling it biblical. This is the scene in Asheville, which is now isolated after roads leading into the town flooded and cell towers were knocked down in the storm.
So this is what we know right now. At least 91 people are dead, and that number is expected to rise, and power is out to some 2.1 million customers across that region. We have team coverage of the storm's aftermath. We start in Asheville with Faith Abube. Good morning, Faith.
Yeah, good morning to you, Robin. It's been days without power, cell phone service, or safe drinking water for so many people here in western North Carolina. Right now, we're in historic Biltmore Village, a popular shopping and dining enclave here in Asheville, which was submerged in water. There's debris all over the place and a muddy mess left behind. This stretches for miles and miles. One official calling the damage biblical devastation. This morning, the death toll climbing after Helene barreled through the southeast. The massive storm killing more than 91 people from Florida to Virginia. In Buncombe County, North Carolina, our affiliate WSOC capturing the scope of the damage from above. At least 30 people declared dead, dozens more unaccounted for.
These response teams are working around the clock to make rescues, to access neighborhoods.
The extreme floods washing away homes and bridges.
Get out of the way! Oh, God!
At one point, North Carolina DOT forced to close more than 400 roads, deeming them unsafe for travel. Members of the National Guard and relief teams from 19 states joining the search and rescue missions.
This is an unprecedented tragedy that requires an unprecedented response.
In Asheville, many residents growing desperate. Cell service and potable water out for days.
This is apocalyptic, not just for Canton, but the entire region.
And Canton Mayor Zeb Smathers telling ABC News it's nearly impossible to reach emergency management due to the cell service outage.
To see our cell phones completely black out and not have the ability to allow people on their own accord to check on their loved ones or say, hey, look, you live near water, please leave.
This is some biblical ass shit, bro, which is crazy because people don't seem to recognize that like the once in every 100 years type shit keeps happening every year. Like what happened? I thought this was like a once in a lifetime circumstance, you know? Like this used to happen. This used to happen once every 50 years max. Okay, maybe every 100 years. Now it's every year, brother. Do we just kind of cast this aside? What do we do? Do we just kind of act like it's normal now? This is the thing. I find it rather odd that like the devastation is so massive. The devastation is so goddamn massive. And the coverage of it is like not up to par, but I don't really know how to match the coverage in general. Like it's never the best kind of analysis to be like, oh, the media's not paying enough attention to this thing, because like they obviously are covering it, but it does kind of shock me how limited the information is. Like I've only seen like TikToks here and there, Twitter links here and there, not a lot of articles. Like if you go to Google News, like here, like there is some Hurricane Helene stuff. Okay. But even this morning, it was mostly like Israel. Morning Joe tears into Trump over calling Harris stupid. But this is my own personal briefing. Maybe that's the reason. But I do feel as though like the coverage does not match the devastation. You know what I mean? It almost feels as normalized. It almost feels as normalized as like mass shootings to a certain degree. Because the thing I mean about this is that I'm not saying the media is not covering it at all. Of course it is. But this kind of shit would be like week-long, if not month-long news coverage. Like, a lot of you are younger, so you probably don't recall Katrina. Okay? This is like a yearly event now. It almost feels like we are living in a post-Katrina world where Katrina is a yearly event. And the scale of the devastation is Katrina across multiple territories. And it's like not as big. It doesn't feel like it's as big as a fucking story. Like you had Kanye West on the fucking phone trying to do fundraisers on television when that was happening. That's why he had that famous moment where he was like, George W. Bush doesn't care about black people. Like that's from that. That's how big of a thing that was. And I do think now it's like, it's almost like Sandy Hook normalized mass shootings. And now in that same degree, it just, you know, it holds the attention of people for like maybe a day, maybe 2 days. And then we just move on. I don't know if it's like also because like our attention span is limited. I don't know if it's because I've just been thinking about it a lot. I don't know if it's because of our attention spans that are limited now as a consequence of like TikTok or whatever, but it is kind of weird. And I don't know if it's because like, I'm not saying that this is like a deliberate effort to like normalize. It's like hyper normalization of these kinds of like climate atrocities. I don't think that, but it is strange. It is strange to me that it's like, I mean, it isn't as bad as Katrina that was half of Louisiana's coastline that was destroyed. Bro, Asheville is gone, brother. Asheville, North Carolina is gone. The dam broke. It's over. You know, it's just like fully underwater at this point. It's crazy. I think it is definitely Katrina level. Regarding coverage, bridges are rendering entire regions virtually entirely inaccessible by land. There's no power. There's no internet. I'm sure information will be scarce coming out of it from the ground versus being able to get aerial shots. This is like apocalyptic levels of destruction, as a chatter put it. One aspect of this story that's really up is that like we are directly causing it with anthropogenic climate change, okay? As the world heats up more and more, I guess, in the simplest terms, directly as a consequence of our emissions, things that scientists keep saying are going to happen are happening over and over again. And a big chunk of people are just like, nah, I'm different, dog. We're different. It's fine. The only the most significant, most consequential climate change policy that we have seems to be the border policy. You know, like a more military, a more militant border, a more white nativist, more militant border policy is like the only thing that we are setting up for. Like we're not hardening our infrastructure even enough. And half of the entire political field basically denies it's even happening and is like trying to legislate away the mention of it. Like you look at Florida, it's like they're too busy being like, nah, climate change is fake. Like, don't say it. Don't say it's real, please. And it blows my mind. Fango Lives, our EV correspondent, says, easy way to explain climate change makes storms stronger. Global warming makes water warmer. Warmer water has more energy. So storms passing over that water gain more energy from the warmer water, which means there's stronger storms. We've added several billion nuclear bombs worth of energy to the ocean in a couple decades. Yes, that is a good way to explain it. Thank you. That's also partially due to climate change migration. No, I know. That's why I'm saying like our border security measures is a climate change infrastructure hardening initiative. It's because there are going to be more and more like people that previously worked in like the agricultural sector that are not going to be able to work. So they're going to migrate as their economy is devastated. They're going to migrate north. They're going to come to America because there's ecological disaster there and they don't have any money to even harden their infrastructure nor overcome the damage that climate change is causing in those regions. Beyond the migration patterns, right? We literally have basically at this point, you know, developing nation levels of infrastructure in the wealthiest nation on the planet, dude. Like, it's wild to me that we just straight up have a situation where half of the political population, half of our government is like, it doesn't exist, so don't do anything about it. The other half is like, it does exist, but we are going to be susceptible to political pressure from the right and from moneyed interests, like in the oil and gas sector. So we're going to keep drilling, baby. We're going to keep fucking fracking, drill, baby, drill, but like, you know, gay version. Okay. And we hear you, we see you, we want to trust the science, but also we're not going to trust the science that much, because as long as it harms the bottom line of like oil and gas giants, then we're going to not trust the science that much, right? How are immigration and disasters of hurricanes correlated? No, you're looking at one aspect of how climate change and the once in a lifetime like weather events like climate change created catastrophes occur in America, but you're failing to consider that when this happens in like Mexico, it's even more devastating. But beyond that, climate change also causes drought in a lot of places, especially in Latin America. Not only do they not have enough money to harden their infrastructure against this sort of thing when this kind of devastation occurs and it completely collapses entire ecologies, but beyond that, you have climate refugees. You have people that can no longer work the land because the land is no longer tenable. So what do? They migrate. They migrate further north, right? You have climate refugees that are like are coming to America because like at least there's still land that you can work on and make money on. So that's how millions of people are displaced, and America knows that like it's going to happen more and more. It's kind of like the classic Chevron, Exxon Mobil having full knowledge of the carbon emissions causing anthropogenic climate change and global warming in general, and like refusing to do anything about it. And as a matter of fact, having that full knowledge and then only using that knowledge to create PR structures against it so that you can create an environment where like 30 to 40% of the entire fucking nation doesn't even believe it's real, right? That's what they did since the 80s. They were like, oh shit, this is going to be a problem in the future. So let's make sure that it doesn't become a problem for us and our bottom line by creating an entire system in media to just lie to the American public. And that is one of the negative consequences of this reality, because you're seeing biblical levels of destruction. Okay, you're watching biblical levels of destruction, and what are some Americans saying about it? How are some people reckoning with this reality? How are some people dealing with this reality? They're dealing with it by blaming like weather machines or something. And it's no different than mass shootings. Here's why it's no different than mass shootings. Mass shootings are not a natural disaster, but we analyze it like it's a natural disaster. Why? Because we are completely captive to corporate interests in that regard. Gun manufacturers make too much money for us to ever actually deal with the gun violence that happens in this country. So in that situation, if you are going to refuse to see the reality of the matter, Hurricane Katrina, Category 5 major hurricane, 1,392 fatalities, 135 missing. Hurricane Helene, Category 4 major hurricane, 121 fatalities, 673 missing. So it doesn't seem like it's as bad as Katrina. Dude, it's what are we doing? Like, it's pretty bad still, dude. That is crazy. And I think it's more than 673 missing, by the way. I think those numbers are incorrect. We don't even know the full numbers at this point, don't we? It's also where the hurricane hit. Like, it's not even the coastline in this situation. It's crazy. What I'm trying to explain here is this, okay? If you are refusing to reckon with the reality in front of you, you are going to look for alternative realities as to why things are happening. And that's why there are so many conspiratorial psychopaths out there. Okay, that's my point. My point is there are so many conspiracy-brained losers out there because they've been duped into refusing to acknowledge what the truth is. Okay, we're so far removed from that. And it's the same principle behind gun violence as well, which we also analyze like it's a naturally occurring phenomenon. We're like, oh, do not look to the actual problem, which is guns, okay? Mass arsenal of weapons that are readily available to the public. More guns than there are people, but God forbid you analyze it with the actual root cause of the problem. No, we got to desperately cling on to anything and else, anything and everything we can. Oh, it's got to be door control. We got to give more guns to the teachers. We got to do this. We got to do that. And that's why so many people at this point, now that they've exhausted all other options, whenever mass shootings occur, they now go, oh, it's because the shooter is trans. I've imagined that the shooter is trans and trans people are doing these mass shootings. Or This is a psyop. This is a government psyop. They actually are doing this because they want to do gun control, which never happens, by the way. Worst, shittiest psyop of all time, right? So that's it. That's why people hyper focus on like insane shit. This happened in Hawaii too. Oh, it must be like space lasers that did the fires. It cannot be that the brush is just simply drier than it has ever been. It cannot be like full-blown ecological collapse that caused massive wildfires. It's got to be space lasers. Look at the blue cars. The blue cars didn't light on fire. Like, we are purposely making our population dumber and dumber and dumber because it's like easier to control and manipulate in some ways, but also simultaneously, this is not tenable. This is not sustainable. The way we analyze the situation is so messed up. Here, this is a Matt Christman quote that it talks about it, okay? These guys that marched in Charlottesville, these are the people who are aware of the unspoken premise of this sort of zombie neoliberalism that we're living in, which is that we're coming to a point where there's going to be ecological catastrophe and that it's going to require either massive redistribution of the ill-gotten gains of the first world or genocide. And these are the first people who have basically said, well, if that's the choice, then I choose genocide. And they're getting everyone else ready intellectually and emotionally for why that's going to be okay when it happens. Why they are not really people. When we're putting all this money into more falls and drones and bombs and guns to keep them away so that we can watch them die with clear consciences, it's because we have been loaded with the ideology that these guys are now starting to express publicly. On the other side of them, we have people who are saying in full voice, no, we have the resource to save everybody, to give everybody a decent and worthwhile existence, and that is what we want. And that is the real difference between these two. And you can tell that to the next asshole who tells you that they're actually two sides of the same coin. We are the people who say we have the money, we have the capacity, we have a surplus of food. We are the people who can save everybody else. We just choose not to. And the problem with neoliberalism and the problem with like the Democratic Party's capitulation to right-wing framing on issues is that they are also slaves of the same master, the master of capital. Okay, they are still deeply, they have a deeply vested interest in maintaining this corporate oligopoly, this corporate oligarchy. So they have to make some messages, like messaging differences between the Republican Party. But ultimately, that's why every 4 years you see them bouldering towards more and more right-wing framing on these issues. Now, I want to dive into this a little bit further. I want to talk about this a little bit more. In this past month alone, there have been so many issues that that a competent Democratic Party would literally be messaging around over and over again to a degree where this would not even be a close race at all. We had a mass shooting. That's a gun control issue. The Democrats could have messaged around it. We forgot about the mass shooting already. Like it literally happened like what, a month ago, 2 months ago? Okay. Nothing. No competent fucking conversation. No competent Democratic leadership on that front at all. Okay. What do? We're still, we're like, yeah, guns are bad. We move on. Okay. A mass shooting happened and the Democrats didn't even message around it. Okay. Another thing. Republicans insanely right-wing framing on immigration. They went so above and beyond that it was gross to the average person. As I told you, this would happen with the Haitians are eating dogs and cats nonsense. Okay, that's another issue that the Republicans have completely gotten out of control on with their messaging. A competent Democratic Party should have made mincemeat out of that. Okay, a competent counterbalance to that kind of unrestricted fascist communication is supposed to sit there and say, do you hear what this fucking person is saying? They're saying your neighbors are eating cats and dogs. They're doing like unrestricted, unfettered racism, okay? White supremacy through and fucking through. Nothing. No statements whatsoever to the humanity of these Haitian migrants that are literally not even undocumented. They are documented. They are documented immigrants. And their status, these guys on the right want to revoke. They want to take that away. Okay? So that's another one. And last but not least, or two other issues, okay? Foreign policy, neocon foreign policy back in the day was supposed to be the Republicans that pushed, more war, more devastation, more destruction, more money to the fucking military, okay? Israel has expanded on its NSEG and is now doing to Lebanon what it was doing to Gaza. Nothing from the Democratic Party except for full-blown unconditional support to Israel, okay? And last but not least, now we also have ecological disasters as a direct consequence of climate change. And the counterbalance to the Republican Party is also running the drill, baby, drill attitude. Think about that. Those are 4 key issues. Domestic policy and foreign policy. 4 key issues that the Democrats are supposed to literally be on the opposing side on. And yet when you look at their policy prescriptions, their answers are no different than the Republican Party. Their answers are like maybe lighter, maybe a little bit more understanding. This is a terrifying prospect for the future of the United States of America. Believing that climate change is real when, like, multiple towns are completely underwater is such a psychotic way of looking at the situation. I don't even know how to deal with it. And that is how we arrive at the viral tweet blaming the flooding in North Carolina on government weather manipulation. FEMA said last week it faces nearly $9 billion of shortfall for Hurricane Helene recovery efforts. On the same day, Israel announced an $8.7 billion weapons package from the U.S. Our tax dollars are funding Israeli war crimes instead of the investments we desperately need here. Can't do it. Can't get Congress to do it. You just can't do it, you know? Meanwhile, here's another fuck you to the police, by the way, because every single thing I talk about, the intersectionality of that violence is in full display right here. The intersectionality of misinformation, the intersectionality of that violence, all of the systems that we exist under that are openly being like, fuck you, die, you poor. Police guarding grocery stores while folks are denied the opportunity to purchase baby formula after losing everything is pretty indicative of where we are as a country. Not letting people into the grocery store. That's what they're using their funds on. Great stuff, man. That's what we're using our local funds on. So why didn't you stock up? Why didn't anyone stock up? The store has to follow procedure from the people like you from buying everything up and then suing the store because they bought bad product. Like, there are people immediately being like, nah. Oh, this guy blocked me. But let's see what he's had to say. Matt Wallace. Don't worry, guys. Weather modification isn't real. It's just a coincidence that Hurricane Helene is one of the most devastating inland damage storms in history, and the hundreds of pro-Trump counties are massively being impacted during those most important elections of our lifetimes. Yeah, obviously the elites would never be evil enough to create hurricanes designed to interfere with democracy. Pay no attention to the storms. 30,000 likes. We're done. We're done. We're done. You cannot come back from this, I think. Here's reporting from Asheville, North Carolina from April 2002 or 2022. Okay, let's take a look about how Asheville was presented as a escape from severe climate change impact.
When it comes to climate, the mountains have always been an attractive place to live, and now even more so with climate change making severe weather events even worse elsewhere. Climate change leading to climate migration.
Weather events are becoming crazy all over the world, and there's places where they're less crazy. Asheville's fortunate to be one of those places.
Now more people taking refuge in the temperate mountains of western North Carolina. This real estate broker saying he's hearing that climate is a big reason why people are moving here.
I think people have noticed and are moving here to escape wildfires, to escape floods, to escape hurricanes, to escape droughts.
Scott Shuford is a local expert in community planning and resilience.
Our big 3 issues of climate change affecting North Carolina are sea level rise, which clearly we're not having a problem with that, but also heavy precipitation and periods of drought.
He says those don't affect us in Asheville as much since we're far from the coast, have the North Fork Reservoir for our water supply, and the elevation to keep our temperatures mild. Not immune to climate change, of course, just less susceptible. And he doesn't think we're anywhere near the peak of climate migration.
Of course, people don't notice these differences year over year. And as I explained already, there's a multi-billion-dollar initiative. There is a multi-billion-dollar initiative to also make people dumber and dumber and refuse to reckon with the reality, because the reality harms capital interests. The reality harms the bottom line of the oil and gas industry. Okay? The entire world runs on fossil fuels. Like, things that you would previously consider insane that, your fellow Americans would believe are now becoming more and more commonplace. Do you not notice that? And if you do notice that, do you not see that as a major problem? Because I certainly do. I definitely do. I find it damaging to public discourse in general. It's so inconsiderate when climate protesters block roads. It's just like, or it's so inconsiderate when, climate. I'm glad that we're like fucking arresting the only people that are like, hey guys, you should pay attention to this because it's going to kill you one day. Yeah. Meanwhile, here's a major contributor to this, by the way. It's actually crazy how quickly we went from people saying Jack Dorsey brought a liberal bias to Twitter to whatever this is, and we hear nothing about it. Okay? Jack Dorsey never in a million years behaved in this outwardly liberal of a fashion. Okay? In the way that Elon Musk very openly communicates like the most unfiltered, unrestricted, right-wing, far-right, sometimes neo-Nazi sentiment. And it's odd, don't you think? It's odd that, we always suspect that there is a liberal bias, but when there is an overt right-wing bias, nobody even talks about it. It's like, what are you supposed to do? There's nothing you could do about it either. Yeah, Elon Musk was even saying, the craziest part about Elon Musk is that he was propped up as this like billionaire Tony Stark style guy by liberals. Okay. This supposed billionaire Tony Stark, who's going to save the world, who's going to send us to Mars or whatever, and he's going to save the planet from climate change, right? He's got EVs. His brother's got a solar panel company, and it's crazy because he was having a conversation with Donald Trump, and even then he was like repeating climate misinformation. Elon was saying climate change disinfo during that Trump interview even, and that's supposed to be the one non-idiotic position he holds. Yes. I mean, in 2017, he quit that Trump White House council over climate change. And now he's talking to the dude and talking nonsense about climate change, saying we don't have to worry until we reach 1,000 ppm. Yeah, he said climate change won't be a problem until the air catches on fire. It was great, man. Yeah, until you get headaches from breathing the air, it won't be an issue. Yeah, the permafrost melting is funny. It's no longer so perma, the frost. It turns out it's tempafrost.